all of you to the session on digital prevention, which will be also more not only on the emotional side but also on the physical side. We want to see how we can strengthen the awareness of users and the compliance towards these issues. And we have different people from companies and also health insurance who are presenting their technologies, and we hope we have a lively discussion. So first of all, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Thomas Hübner, who is the founder and CEO of Preventicus, and he is working on heart rhythm disorders. So I'm happy to hear your brief input. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thomas Hübner. As I've been introduced, I'm a founder and CEO of Preventicus, a company doing smart rhythm or smart cardiac rhythm analysis, mainly for stroke prevention. And I would like to give you my ideas or my view and how such a digital prevention concept may help to increase adherence, compliance towards a healthier life. I do not much like the term digital prevention. In my point of view, it's a more holistic approach, but I will come to this in a second. So what is the story of Preventicus? It's all about stroke prevention. While we are here on stage, in the next hour, approximately 180 people in Europe will suffer a stroke. It's the most complex disability currently worldwide. The number of strokes currently in Europe is approximately 1 million cases per year, and it rises until 1.5 million per year annually in 2025. So due to the increased population, the number of strokes increases. On the other hand, the chance to survive also increases, and the costs in between are getting to explode. So there's one major reason and responsible for up to a third of strokes. It's called atrial fibrillation. It's the most relevant heart rhythm disease. The chance in a lifetime to discover atrial fibrillation is approximately 25%. So it's a mass phenomenon. So in Preventicus, it's all about catching unknown atrial fibrillation. We speak in Germany approximately of 1 million not detected, not treated atrial fibrillation cases, and that's our target, to identify them, to bring them to a treatment. By the way, efficient treatment, it's called mainly anticoagulant therapy, which reduces the stroke rate by 70 to 80%. That's our business case. Identify those patients, bring them to the right treatment, and this finally decreases the stroke rate. So on one hand, stroke is the most leading cause of disability. On the other hand, a lot of strokes can be avoided, and we are identifying the most underlying phenomenon, atrial fibrillation, simply with a smartphone camera. It's just a simple test. You just have to put the smartphone camera. Everyone or every smartphone is working. Just put it on your fingertip. The camera records the pulse waves over a minute and analyze those measurements like an ECG. It is almost as accurate as an ECG. The same technology also is available for smartwatches. This is more for continuous 24-hour heart rhythm monitoring of intermittent rhythm diseases in high-risk population. So on one hand, we have the measurement. This is a basis, but that's finally not enough. We had to do all our homeworks, which means ISO 13485 certification, like a medical device manufacturer. That means a CE Class 2A certification. It means a lot of clinical studies, and finally it means proof of concept, not just in B2B but also in B2C. We speak about now more than 3.5 million completed assessments over the last 24 months. Currently we do it 3,000 times a day. So we embedded the core technology, as you will see in a minute, into more comprehensive clinical care programs. This is the application for the mass screening, but screening is not atrial fibrillation confirmation. Yeah? It must be a clear differentiation between a tool which allows a mass screening, low cost but high accurate, but finally it has to be lead over to the precision medicine and to the treatment, as I come to in a minute. We have a smartwatch technology, as you have seen a second before. This is more or less for high-risk patients, especially after first cryptogenic strokes. And we have a telecare service, which is a final confirmation. If a suspicious finding in the application comes up, it will always be verified from ECG technicians before finally the application rises a red flag for further treatment procedures. So heart-driven screening, atrial fibrillation screening is now part of the guidelines. It's part of larger public campaigns, and this is a huge influencer towards adherence and awareness. Only a company who is doing something, it's most probably not successful if a company does not have win from associations and from public awareness campaigns. UK, by the way, is one of the biggest example in Europe who educating their population about the risks of unknown, untreated atrial fibrillation. So homework means we had to complete our clinical validation. We spent a lot of our resources into clinical multi-center prospective validation studies. Greifswald, by the way, is one of the most relevant study centers. So this is our latest publication showing that Preventicus applications in a prospectively tested setting reaches an accuracy of approximately 96% to identify atrial fibrillation once it occurs. As I said, technology is the most relevant part, but it's not enough to complete the whole patient or the whole customer journey. We embed the whole technology into more comprehensive care programs. I just give you some brief examples how those care programs work. The customers that's a new thing, are approached by the health insurance directly, pre-selected mainly by age. Atrial fibrillation risk starts either in an age over 65 or below if you have further risk factors, where people are asked to do those measurements continuously, 2 times a day for the first 14 days. You see a lot of measuring technologies on the market nowadays. We have a live core ECG electrodes. We even will see the Apple Watch 4 ECG in Europe sooner or later. We can also implement and integrate those third-party ECG measurements and phase in those suspicious ECGs into coordinated care pathways. So as I said, if an application finds something suspicious, the next step is always to do an internal quality check. Even our application is very robust and identifies a lot of artifacts, but a final checkup before those patients are sent over to a cardiologist are still performed by a telecare service to make very sure that it's a true measurement where there's no artifact in, to ask the people, are you know that you have atrial fibrillation, are you under treatment, and if everything is answered properly, only in this case, those patients are sent to the cardiologist. So cardiology, this is the atrial fibrillation service, which is a real-life example in Kiel and Lübeck. The issue is if we send over patients to the standard care, the atrial fibrillation confirmation nowadays takes more or less place with a 24 hours Holter ECG, but unfortunately, because atrial fibrillation is such a shy animal, it comes and it goes, it's very hard to capture AF and confirm AF and treat AF in a standard care. In 8 of 10 cases with AF, those standard care does not work. That's why we implemented another service with a follow-up 14-day service, and those patients are sent over. Time is over? In a second? Okay. So those patients are getting, in case of a positive pre-finding, a follow-up with a 14 days ECG patch. So as I said, comprehensive care programs, it's a complex thing, but that's our key success factor. And from my point of view, this is the answer how to strengthen awareness. It's not just the technology, it needs a more comprehensive program consisting of the stakeholders, of insurances, etc. If a care continuum is not complete and if something's missing, that's my message. Where awareness is not just driven by technology. It means a larger integration inside care programs, and it leads to a larger integration of stakeholders and insurances. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So we will have a discussion later. I would now like to introduce Dr. Mattis and Mr. Westermann from Barmer Supply, head of healthcare management programs, to introduce another very specific type of technologies and interventions focusing on preventing hearing risks.
So yeah, thanks for having us. So it's Henrik Mattis and me, Benjamin Westerhoff. And we want to talk about something completely different. So we were just talking about a life-threatening disease like atrial fibrillation, or what it leads to. And now it's a little easier. We're talking about our initiative for healthy hearing. And what I want to do is just want to give you a moment to imagine or create a picture in your mind what you see when you think of healthy hearing. So let that drop in like a few seconds. And let me show you what we made out of it, if it works. So this might not be what you just had in your mind. What you see here is what we did. It is rolling out the prevention in a very different setting, or very strange setting. It's at a heavy metal concert, no, not concert, but a festival. And they were taking a hearing test. And now you see all of a sudden the setting is completely different to what you would imagine it to be. Maybe the first two pictures would apply. So it's a hearing test. And after that, it turned out that the physician taking the hearing test is not really a physician, but a singer. And there was kind of the switch into it just to create more attention and more awareness. So, but talking about hearing loss, and I think Henrik put this very, very intelligently with the silent epidemic. I love it. If you think of it and what it is, what are the prevalences in Germany, and it's more than 11 million people suffering from it. The 15% of teenagers is a figure that's coming from the US, but it might be quite the same in Germany if you think of young people sitting in the trains and in the buses and always having the earplugs in, like I do, even if I'm not that young. And it creates a lot of costs. So it's 1.5 billion euros. Of course, it's always hard to measure attributable cost, but this is an assumption and it's out of the literature. So what we hear a lot, and there was the thing we heard most when we were at this heavy metal festival, is that people have never taken a hearing test or are not aware that they have ever taken a hearing test so far. And this is the issue. You have to put it into the minds of the people, and this is what we want to do with this prevention campaign. We want to raise the awareness in the healthy people, which is mostly the young people, of course, because those are the ones who do not have developed the issue so far. And therefore it takes to identify the people who are already in the process of developing a problem, and then offer them tools to cope with it, and all of that in their natural environment, if you may. So, and I think this is quite interesting. It's the biggest prevention campaign and also success so far, at least in Germany. We're discussing if it's Europe as well, but we reached more than 300,000 people, which is a huge figure for a prevention program, which is very, very hard to deploy usually. And we saw a lot of attention on social media and all of that, so more than 25 million hits on the YouTube channels, Facebook, and all of that, and I think that's quite a success in itself, and hopefully it will help to prevent some hearing losses in the future as well. But that's, I'll give it up to Henrik.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. So if you think about hearing and prevention, usually it's not a too sexy topic, and we try to rephrase it completely so that it's suddenly something that young people actually care about and want to discuss and and also enjoy. And the last part is probably the trickiest in a usual prevention setting, but what we did is we have hearing test apps out. They are free of charge. It just takes you a couple of minutes to take an accurate hearing test. You can use Android and iOS. And then based on your hearing profile, music will be tailored to your hearing ability. So you suddenly hear way more details, much more clarity at a lower volume, which is the best thing you can do for your hearing. So we have combined the two elements, the raising awareness, but also having an impact in your everyday life with a technology that you can actually use every day. Very briefly on hearing, quick message: the louder, the quicker you should go away from it. You can listen for a full day to birds, but as soon as you're in a rock concert, you have an issue. And Benjamin already summarized it. What we did is not only having digital products out like our hearing test apps and the music player, but we went to a number of festivals. We had a hearing test booth at the festivals, and you wouldn't think about it. We had then suddenly at day 2, from day 2 on usually, on those festivals, the teenagers came to us first before they went to the festivals, because they realized, I should get some hearing protection. Yeah, I lost it yesterday for some reasons, but I should really take care of my hearing because it's precious, something they would never had on their mind anyways if they would just have attended the festivals. We did similar things as well at workplaces and universities, and what Benjamin already talked about, we got into the timelines and feeds of the various social media channels, and this was crucial to get the message out. So if you think about prevention, usually it's about having posters somewhere and maybe some TV spots or whatsoever. But we realized if we want to really reach out to the teenagers, we need to get into their feeds. This is a screenshot of the current campaign. You can adapt the story of this music video if you change the volume. Also to have it really playful, insightful, and directly see what the impact is if you are increasing the volume too much. Cliffhanger: if you get the right volume, the boy gets the girl in the end. And now we want to quickly summarize what we learned in the past 2 years and why we think this is helpful.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the slide is saying most of it, and you can, of course, read through it. But it's about not educating, not raising the finger, but making it seamlessly for the people and helping them to let prevention come alive in their own personal lives. I think this is the key fact to do it, and therefore you have to find other ways and be creative and courageous. And I think curiosity is a major word here to every innovation there is. If you're not curious, you're not going to find something new.
And we were extremely lucky to have BAMA as a partner, because if you think about health insurances, you would not think about a heavy metal hearing test prank video on YouTube. The video alone got about 6 million views in the first 5 weeks, which is absolutely outside anything that the usual health insurance would bother going into. So this was super helpful. As I said, we went into the timelines and feeds of the people, and we had products that were as easy to use as possible. So we didn't gather any data of those individuals. You could directly start with a hearing test, you directly got results, and then if you wanted to, you can create a profile to adjust your sound. So we want to thank you very much for your patience right now, and are happy to go on stage then later on for the panel.
Thank you very much for this very innovative approach. I don't know whether you encountered this when you talk about hearing risk. People always say, "What?" That's a typical reaction. So I would like to introduce the final speaker, Professor Rösch. What will you talk about? I have looked at your background, so you will talk about digital prevention in general.
That's not me.
That's you.
That's me, okay. Yeah, thank you very much for your kind introduction. I want to talk about some projects and some ideas that we have, so talking about digital prevention. So I come from Kaiserslautern and Campus Zweibrücken, University of Applied Science, and we're working in medical informatics, and so we should focus on how we can implement and support digital prevention with in daily life settings. Yeah, the problem is perhaps that today healthcare providers only paid when they do curative work. Yeah, so our whole system is curative oriented, and with that, preventive medicine is not sufficiently rewarded today. And this is perhaps the case because socioeconomic effects play not so much a role and are not sufficiently taken into account. And perhaps because it is a hard issue to show that prevention works in real life settings, and the clinical impact is often hard to measure. So I believe that digitization enables even evidence-based medicine to be active in prevention, and that could lead to the fact that we have computer-assisted personalized advice based on medical guidelines, and that we can also, due to the digitalization and the data we acquire, we can better see if there is a positive clinical outcome in clinical studies. And this is perhaps also the reason why we have set up the DDA project together with the partners you see here below. The idea is that we want to include smart services in digital assisted diet counseling. This is today more or less paper pencil work, and to see if that works, that we use digital media and assisted decision support, we have focused on two different use cases. The first is the frailty syndrome. It's for the elderly people. They have very often decreased protein intake and therefore muscle weakness. And the secondary prevention in aspects are focused on the adverse reaction to food, means food allergy and food intolerances. So what can we do in these cases? For example, a computer-aided decision support should be focused first to control the food intake and the food composition. That is most the case in the frailty setting. And the determination of adverse reactions to food, that is more the idea of a smart service for food allergy. And but we have here totally different user groups. If you see some sort of digital native, the young lady working with her smartphone, she is able to do very complex diaries, and with this data we can support the diagnostic process. On the other side, we have elderly people, 85 and above. For them it's hard to handle such complex issues. So you see that the graphical user interfaces or the user management is a very important issue, and this is combined with the idea that we need to have an atmosphere of trust in the digital prevention activity. That means we have to trust the algorithms that support the decisions. We have to trust the data quality coming from the patient side, but also from third parties, for example, from food product databases. And we have to assure that there is a correct protection of personal data. And ongoing, there are some clinical trials in both pilots that should measure if also the usability is high enough to produce such data. Another example to support these ideas is also based on stroke and cardiovascular diseases. We have heard already from Dr. Hübner that there is a strong public health concern on these illnesses. And it is for sure clear that lifestyle modifications, they can play a major role in limiting these burdens. But how we can bring the risk populations and enable them to long-term behavior changes. Most of the time people say we can use now smartphone apps, they are available, but in very often and some cases perhaps a smartphone app is not the best tool ever. So there is, especially in the elderly people group, some bad user experiences already. We have low confidence on this time. Then do not forget that these devices cost a lot and that we have missing network coverage in rural regions especially, and we have assistant and training required. So what is maybe a better or easier to handle user interface, and that is what you see here below, this the telephone. So how we can combine this, both things, computer-assisted decision support and the telephone. So we have used this technical method to ask the patient about his specific behavior and give him advice using evaluated psychological methods to bring him to another level of behavior. And the system asks questions about food intake, about physical activities and so on. And the technical barriers are really low. So the data will be produced in this way that I show you now. There is an authentication, and then
Guten Tag. Bitte geben Sie jetzt Ihre Patientennummer ein.
there is an authentication process.
Geben Sie jetzt Ihren 4-stelligen Geheimcode ein.
Now the patient is ready to start with the coaching process. And this is a shortened version of it, so it takes a little bit more
Wie viele
time.
Portionen Obst und Gemüse haben Sie gestern verzehrt?
Okay.
Sehr schön. Wenn man Ihre Daten aus den letzten Wochen betrachtet, können wir sagen, sehr gut. Machen Sie weiter so.
So all advices are done in runtime.
Wie viele Portionen Süßwaren haben Sie gestern verzehrt? Sie wollen doch Ihr Idealgewicht erreichen, dann verzichten Sie doch auf Süßwaren. Der Rückblick auf Ihre Daten in diesem Bereich zeigt Folgendes: Essen Sie Obst anstatt Süßwaren. Das schmeckt auch sehr lecker.
So you see, it's funny, but at the end of the day
Zusammenfassend
comes a
können wir
summary.
Ihnen folgenden Rat geben. In den folgenden Bereichen müssen Sie sich erheblich verbessern: Vollkornprodukte, Süßwaren und körperliche Aktivität. Nichtsdestotrotz, bei Gewicht sind Sie schon gut, aber es sollte noch besser werden. Es freut uns, Ihnen mitzuteilen, in den Bereichen Obst und Gemüse und Zigaretten sind Sie wirklich spitze.
So now the question is, does it work or not? Yeah, and therefore we have set up a randomized clinical trial with patients from Luxembourg and neurologic patients, and made a 6-month follow-up. And I'm happy to say that we have significant improvements in the intervention group, a lower blood pressure, better blood fatty LDL values, and also 77% are very happy and say that they have lifestyle improvements reported. And usability is very high. We have a grade A, that means SUS score of 80, and publish these results. So you can take a look at the research article I mentioned here, and we want to commercialize now the idea. So that's my talk.
Thank you very much, Professor Röschbrock. So each of you have presented projects, innovations in very specific conditions. So you have a strong lobby also for one specific patient group. I would raise a few issues. Maybe first with you. You focused also on frailty, and you just showed us the program. And I've been also working on frailty, and one of the biggest risks is losing weight.
Absolutely.
In older age, and especially lifestyle changes in old age are very invasive in terms of the patient. So the question is, does it really work in patients who are frailty? Is this not a risk of bringing them to lose more weight?
Yeah, it's exactly the question we want to answer. First, we want to enable the healthcare professionals to know more about eating behavior of those patients, and especially also about their ability to move and to have physical activity. And physical activity is measured within the project with specific devices, smartwatches and belts. And so I think we have pretty good knowledge about what they do. And we have several tests on the usability made if they are able to answer the questions on a tablet app correctly or not. So the user interface is very simple. I hope that it helps.
So this is more a method to observe the eating behavior.
Yeah, and then to have the correct data for the nutritionists to give them better advices. Yeah.
Okay, so this is also directed in the area of primary prevention. So yours was in the area of primary prevention, helping people prevent developing disorders, and yours is in the area of secondary prevention, because you want to detect problems, yeah, which are already there. I'd like to ask you, Thomas, you are working in a field, cardiology, which has the longest history of telemedicine and digital approaches, and also a lot of experience. So how do you bring in a new algorithm if there has been such a long history already in the telemedical area and so many resistances and also successes in some areas? So are you still able to bring through another digital development?
It's a very good question. In the first years, we started with a new technology to identify something. We tried out ourselves by consumer marketing. We were quite successfully in target-specific advertisement. We had high rates of low cost per install and high conversion rates. We had a freemium model, but the initial approach was we want to make consumer marketing to learn how the consumers are using our technologies, what needs to be improved. But consumer businesses is never something I get rich of it. It's the money we earn in the consumer marketing or in selling to end consumers, we spend for online marketing activities. We had in the first years, we issue what we accurately identify users having something. We got backwind from the cardiac societies, from the European Stroke Associations. We did a lot of campaigns for us, but we had always the issue that we had to connect our service to the regulated healthcare system. And in the first years, we failed in this. We had a nice technology to screen even in large populations, but we did not complete the whole circle. Nowadays, and it was, in our case, it was a problem. The people who are identified by our technologies, who are transferred to the regulated care, the doctors in the standard care often were not able to confirm the issue because, I said, standard care fails in 8 of 10 cases. Nowadays, we left being a technology company. We still do it, but we created a whole care program around the core technology, and this is what's now it's extremely successful. We found a business case for the physicians. We have a payers in the board, and only if all parties are being part of those care cycle, now it works. So the answer is being a single technology company does not help a lot. It creates troubles in the market. If you're getting bigger and successful, you make trouble. The doctors are going. The people are going to the doctors, and the doctors they have no business. Where they have to deal with the funny new reports. Sometimes we had the doctors against us. Now it's a totally different story, but you have to complete the care continuum. So did I answer your questions? Or
you pointed to a very important issue regarding all digital devices in prevention, the sensitivity and specificity issues. Are these technologies helpful in detecting the real problems? Do they not detect false problems? Can you use them for prediction? So you said you have 5% specificity problems, or was it? And how was it in your research concerning the hearing devices and yours? I would like to hear about this from all.
So we are in the mass screening business, and we designed our test towards a very high specificity and a very, very high positive predictive value. We cannot afford any single patient being identified false positively and going to the regulated care. This is a big issue in the mass businesses. We have a total accuracy, for example, of 96%, a sensitivity of 92%, but the most important fact in the mass screening is a high specificity and a high positive predictive value. In our case, 99% positive predictive value means that people who are identified with Preventicus, in 99%, the doctor is now able to confirm this issue. If you lose specificity by 10% in the mass business, it means huge costs for the healthcare system. So
it is good that you have the data. Do you have some experience with health hearing risks?
So I think first of all, it's important to stress what Thomas just said. So it's about integrating the processes you have in the digitized world into the processes that are already existing. At least if it's something that is relevant for the physician. And so I think this is key. And it's about not creating costs that don't have to be there. And it's not only about the cost, it's about blocking the time of the physician as well. So I think these are two points that stress how important it is. I think the hearing campaign is something completely different. So we, as Barmer, one of the biggest statutory health insurance companies in Germany, do prevention in several fields. But if you think of it from our perspective, it's also very interesting or of importance if it's primary or secondary prevention, because that decides which paragraph can be used and where the money comes from. So we are a statutory body. We are highly regulated, and this is a good thing. It's not always easy, but it's a good thing. And this is the first thing we always have to get our heads around. So in which drawer, if you want to use this picture, does it fit? And this is the first thing we have to get our heads around.
It's maybe too invasive, but I'm curious to hear why you selected hearing risks. Did you have too many costs in terms of secondary cure, or don't you find secondary prevention strategies? So maybe it's a lack of secondary prevention strategies in this respect. That's why you decided to go to the primary prevention area?
No, I think primary prevention is very important, as well as it is the secondary prevention, and there's a lot going on in this field as well. So if you think of disease management programs and all of that. But if you look at the field of primary prevention, we've been very opportunistic, you might say. So you look at what are the best solutions that might really help. And so even in the digital space, of course, there's a lot of not very, very good solutions out there as well. And we are reliable for the money we spend to our customers. So if you think what a statutory health insurance does, it's first of all, it's a non-profit organization, and second of all, it's only there to distribute the money in the most meaningful way it can do it. And I think if you think of that and then acting opportunistically and also reaching interesting target groups, then it's I think the best case you can create there. Yeah.
But is hearing risk not an issue where you detect something earlier and you create costs which would not have been there because people sometimes do not detect their hearing problems their whole life, only in old age?
So what we know from literature is that undetected hearing loss has a significantly high correlation to dementia, Alzheimer, and depression. People socially isolate, so they cannot interact with their social environment, and they more and more isolate themselves and they almost all of the cases are even not aware of that because it's a very gradual process over decades. And the money you would invest early on into hearing devices like hearing aids or all the products that are coming now to the market are so much better spent early on because you can protect what you or prevent what you still have. If you just leave hearing loss untreated, then it's a continuous loss, and all those individuals have a very limited social life from then on, and all those other diseases upcoming. So creating awareness and also offering solutions around hearing, how to protect hearing, how to educate people around it, is, at least in our perspective, very well spent. The earlier the better. And we have something at the moment which is very uncommon. Hearing loss among teenagers is increasing if you compare that to the decades earlier on, because you have an unlimited supply of content and very powerful devices. So the combination of Spotify and Beats. Hearing loss used to be a problem of older people because biology kicks in, and the older you get, the worse you can hear. That's a normal process. But now we have a generation of teenagers growing up that have a hearing loss comparable to those who are 40, 50 years old, and they're not even aware.
How do you evaluate the effectiveness of this primary prevention program? And how do you want to evaluate the long-term effectiveness?
Yeah, that's a question. We're on it right now, evaluating it. So I think Henry can say a little bit more about this. But this is a problem in prevention in general. So if you look at the prevention field, the primary prevention field, it's the worst evaluated section in healthcare of all. It's horrible. How very how little evidence there is, and we're still paying for it. And so everybody thinks, and I think it's quite a good assumption to think that it kicks in and that it will help, but the evidence is really low right now. And I think, you're going to educate us on what we're doing, because honestly, I'm not really aware how the method is working and what we're doing.
So part of the prevention program we set up was from the very beginning on a scientific evaluation to actually make sure that what we do has some impact. So we have been running a evaluation over the past couple of months, identifying a cohort of 500 people and 500 people who actually went through this program to understand, does it change intention and behavior? We don't have yet final results yet, but what we see is already positive tendency towards a intention change. So although it looks very gimmicky and playful, people realize or get to the point that they realize that their hearing is sensitive and they should take some actions to prevent it from getting worse. So this is, in our case, part of the prevention program we run. We also understood that this is not yet always the case, but we would very much lobby to have such an evaluation as part of a larger program.
And if I can add to that, on a different topic, what we have as well under our reimbursement is MySugar. So it's a secondary prevention for diabetic people, and there we helped to set up the method. So we browsed through our insurees, who has diabetes, who is on insulin. And then we divide them into two groups. So we randomize them and only send one half of them the letter to invite them to use MySugar, and then create or deploy an intention to treat study afterwards. But it's not that easy to prove that digital prevention products or digital prevention in general is really working. So I think the best example, even in telemedicine, is right now the study of the Charité, which we were also taking place in heart failure, and this was the first one ever to show that telemedical intervention in people with heart failure, which is the lowest hanging fruit there can be, if you talk to physicians, has finally proven in the second study they were doing that it really has an effect. So the first study they were doing just said, yeah, well, we can't see any evidence that it helps. So they had to narrow down the target group to find that. And I think that shows that it's very important to reach a very pointy target group.
Yeah, I think all of your presentations have shown that you have to specific on a specific patient group. I think they have included a lot of depressive patients as well in the first study, and so they have to be more selective in the Köhler study. What did you encounter? Do you have to be more broad or more specific? In terms of e-mental health, in the previous section, there were some advocates who said, yes, we have to go to the broadest population we can.
Yeah, I think that there are two different issues. The first thing is that we do not have to spend money in things that are not proven. For that, I think that that we need initiatives that are, at the end of the day, they have a high value for prevention. And because of digitalization issues, we can produce data that is able to evaluate at the end of the day. You made it in with your data within Barmer. We have done it so far in our clinical trials, and this helps, in fact, to overwhelm the current situation and to perhaps have arguments at the end of the day that prevention activities need to be increased. Yeah? And I think this is so that we have not this situation anymore. Yes, we spend money in poster against smoking, but nobody knows if the number of smokers is decreased at the end of the day. Or the posters we spend on the highways against do not drive or drive carefully. Does it help or not? Yeah, I think all these are prevention issues. Yeah, and we spend a lot of money in this, but I think it's now time to change and to invest in things that have already showed up that they're working.
I'm actually very happy that they did this second study, but because the usual process is that you stop at that stage, so that's very good. I would like to know from all of you, what are your biggest obstacles where you have to fight with in your area? Thomas?
Maybe also to follow up your 2 points. Obstacle number 1, science is good, business case is good, but for long years we had the issue with health economic evaluation being sometimes a prerequisite to fit in the special care contracts who need to be approved in Germany by the Bundesversicherungsamt. It must be dealing with larger public health insurances means if you are part of a special care contract which needs to be cleared by the Bundesversicherungsamt. Yeah? And if you apply certain paragraphs, you need to provide a health economic evaluation. You need to provide an independent evaluation that the costs a health insurance is spending for you for detecting and treating something is lower than the costs of avoidable strokes in our case. We now have that independent evaluation. We can prove that the costs of detection and treatment are lower than the whereby avoided strokes, but this was a prerequisite to let our care programs fit into Bundesversicherungsamt compliant version. So Bundesversicherungsamt clearance and health economic independent health economic evaluations were in the former months our biggest obstacles.
Do you have obstacles? It doesn't sound like that.
When we started this prevention initiative together, digital prevention was not even given or backed by the legal ground. So we very creatively interpreted the given laws on what we can do together to come up with a concept of a digital setting, which was not existing before. We found strong partners in the health and environment to back this up, and then just did it, and it was so successful that it was difficult to prove from then on that this should not exist. So the given law is usually not the pace how the law is adapted is just not in line with how technology in our lives change. So that's a big one, and BVA, the Bundesversicherungsamt, is one of the authorities in that environment that is, if I can put it mildly, not very favorable in this whole context. So this is definitely something where we need to work on. We were lucky; we had good partners to get this started in the digital setting, but this was anything but given that it even is allowed in the way we do it.
Yeah, I think the biggest obstacle for us is just the amount of solutions that are in the field, and that you have to say no quite a lot. And it's not always due to the product not being that good, but just to not being able to find a way to implement it. So if you think of our company, we have approximately 15,500 employees, but not very much of them are taking care about how we implement selective contracts and prevention projects and all of that, because of course there's a lot of other things to do. So, and this is really something that decreases the amount of projects that we're capable of doing, even if we're such a big company and spending such a large amount of money. I think that's the biggest obstacle for us. Around all the regulatory things, we usually find a way.
We've seen that most solutions will finally be integrated in complex care programs, although the beauty of digitalization seems to be being minimal or small or minor. So do you have any kind of solutions which are minimal and which remain minimal?
Yeah, I think this is what we're seeing here. So prevention, if you think of to what kind of intervention this leads in the end, it's mostly nutrition, physical activity, of course, manage your stress, all of that. So it's all known, and there's nothing new about it. But what is new is that technology enables us to find the individual pain point and work on that. So if you find a certain problem in an individual, you can easier convince him to do something about it. And of course, that's not the only thing we do if you think of bonus programs and all of that, but this is key to really make it happen, because all the concepts behind it are well known.
Thank you. Norbert, your final comment on your obstacles.
Yes, perhaps. To come back to the example of the phone-based lifestyle coaching, that is especially what you said. There we have the chance that to measure directly if someone wants to participate or not. When he's say, I do not want to be active in my personal lifestyle changement, I stop this, and this is visible in the data. So it becomes measurable. And using the data, we see whether the blood pressure and the weight and other things decreases or increases and get better as well. So this is perhaps some, and the obstacle now to make it happen is that we're searching for partners. We have redeveloped this method to a system that is able to handle data of thousands of patients. So we can make it in a real big settings, and we need now partners with the wish to show it up if that can be a solution for perhaps in Germany we have about 10 million patients that are in the risk group of stroke, and that could help to some of them.
Thank you. I'm sure you will find some. I would also like to ask you whether you have a final question. One or two are possible. So first you.
My question goes to the Mimi-Bama connection. You just said that you found, so I run a depression app called MoodPath. You said you found a creative way, I'm assuming this is SGB 5, somewhere around prevention. Could you just say maybe one or two sentences? Because, obviously that would be interesting for me, like what drawer you actually found, how it fit in, and what the basis is.
Yeah, it's a good question. And also the paragraph which we used has a beauty to it. So it's setting prevention, paragraph 20 in the 5th book of social law. And the beauty of it is that it's not only applicable for our patients, so for our injuries, but setting prevention, which this is taking place in, is always applicable for the whole society. So no matter where you insure it, it doesn't really matter to that. So we're quite helping other insurance companies as well with this, I hope. But yeah, I'm hoping they'll repay the favor by innovative products that they deploy.
I have two questions. First of all, obviously preventive healthcare is still quite new, so how to create a usable business model based on your products, for example, to incorporate insurance companies. I know it is very hard to deal with the public insurance system, no matter in what country, in China, in Germany, or in Netherlands. So I just want to ask, how do you deal with to make the business model work? A second question regarding nutrition analysis. So how do you make sure the patients provide trustworthy feedbacks towards how many intakes they gave just by telephone? Because if you only choose on the telephone and you don't provide evidence, for example, pictures or something like that, how do you make sure that they say, I eat 6 muffins per day? How to make sure that's true? For example, there are smart glass solutions where I can take pictures, for instance. Have you considered that?
Thank you. The first question is to Norbert. Maybe first the final question and then to you.
Yeah, you are totally right. That is a big issue. Today, we have the same situation. There is a paper pencil approach. Patient doing diaries, yeah, and they write on a sheet of paper what they have eaten in the last weeks, and we call it sometimes parking lot diaries, as the patient does it directly before visiting the doctor. So please think about what have you eaten 3 days ago, yeah, and write then this data. So with the timestamp, we have a better control, and we give at least the possibility to make photos of it, and we have there is a big pressure on the patient as they are ill. They like to find out what are the elicitors of their food allergy, for example, and they knew when we do not write it carefully, then they have no chance to find out what is the reason for my...
Benjamin, a final word?
Yeah, maybe with Henrik together, because it's not up to me to create business cases. It's up to me to see if a certain project or solution fits into the regulatory framework. That's what I have to do. And as soon as it's secondary prevention or real healthcare that has to prove its cost efficiency, then of course it's up to us to prove or disprove that doing something at the beginning of the progress really saved money in the end of it. So then it comes to us, but prevention and making business cases out of it is really not our business.
I thank you for your audience and your comments, and I thank all of you for your presentations and discussions. So thank you very much, and there will be probably time to exchange more ideas here in the corner. Thank you very much.